Hi friends, happy Tuesday. How's everyone doing? It is spring and it feels so good. I'm just adjusting here. I had my bonus son all weekend long and he used this tripod last for his guitar class. So I had to reset it up for me here. Want to hear how everyone is doing. Welcome to spring. It's such a fun season here in New York City. Before we dive into today's live stream, which I got a lot I want to cover on scaling today, and as I was prepping for today's live, it actually turned into a bigger topic than I thought. So we've got a lot we're going to dive into, but hey Jen, nice to see you. A couple quick reminders for everyone. We have next month's free masterclass, Your Money Map, which will be Tuesday at 6 p.m. in here Eastern as we usually go live. But if you want to sign up to get the bonus playbook, my team created a really great playbook for you with journaling prompts. It also has a flow chart in there with some of what we're going to talk about. You'll want to get yourself signed up at kimargetsinger.com / I think it's just money-map. It might be your money-map. I'll make sure I drop a link after this. You can also go to the top of the Facebook group and just click on that image. Get yourself signed up. We have one of these every month, but the playbooks I think are always a really nice asset to have afterwards. So get yourself signed up for that. That'll be next week. Today, we are giving away a free copy of my self-study sales course, Sell Out Without Feeling Like a Sellout. It's a 6-week sales course. It's all in one PDF for you, so you can kind of binge through it if you want to. How to master the art and craft and strategy of heart-centered sales, selling without the ick. It's the process I use personally. It's what I use with my clients. It's something I've created through my own business experience, and it's really based on sales psychology, as well as taking a very integrity-based approach. All you gotta do is say hi on today's live, comment, leave an emoji, leave a comment as you normally would. If you don't want it, don't worry about commenting, go ahead and comment anyway. We will pick someone tomorrow. So if you watch between now and tomorrow, we'll pick a winner, we'll DM you and get that over to you. If you don't want it, you can send it to someone else, but I more than anything wanna thank you for being here, hanging with me every week. I know there's a lot of people online you could be hanging out with. I always appreciate having you here. I also know we tend to have long live streams, so it means a lot to me, and it's always way more fun when I get to hang with you live. So that is my thank you to you. I'm trying to think if there are any other the other announcement. This isn't really an announcement. To check in with y'all in the group, leave me a comment and let me know. I've been thinking about moving our live streams back to about 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. Really just because I realized last week when we were chatting how much I like having some daylight when we're live. It just feels good for energy. So I know for those of you in Europe, that might be an easier time to catch the live stream. So let me know if you have any preference. I know we've been going live at 6 Eastern for, years and years at this point. So if that's something y'all are into, let me know. We'll start mapping that out for some of the future lives we're going into April, May. If y'all want me to keep the time the same at 6 p.m., let me know. If you don't care, obviously you don't have to comment, and I'll make my own personal choice. But since I do these to hang out with you and to give value to you, figured I'd let everyone chime in. All right, I think those are all the announcements. Yeah, those are all the announcements. We got a free training next month. Leave a comment, say hi if you want to win Sell Out Without Feeling Like a Sellout. Comment anyway if you have questions. You're not stuck with that if you don't want to win that, and then jamming on that new live stream topic. Okay, let's dive into 3 ways to scale your income and impact without hustling more. I have so much to say on this topic, so we might need to do this as a 2-parter. What this really started as is I wanted to share some really simple ways to scale with you, because I have so many clients come to me when they're in a place where they're ready to scale or where they're thinking about scaling, and we're chatting through this, and I think our online space can make scaling seem really complicated, and so I wanted to simplify that a little bit. But as I was thinking through some of what I wanted to share with you, it felt almost irresponsible to just throw at you some ways to scale without really thinking about some of the disciplines I really believe in that go kind of underneath the hood of scaling. These are disciplines that have really served me in scaling my business. Yes, in building and growing, but in scaling, and I see those as different things, which we'll chat about. And that I really see support my clients, that I see support my colleagues who are scaling to multi-6 figures, a million plus. And I want to chat about that first, and then I'll still share those 3 ways, simple, easy ways to scale without hustling more. But I want to dig into those disciplines a little bit. I'm so hesitant to use the word discipline because I know that's sort of like for us entrepreneurs and for us creatives, it's almost like, oh, discipline, that's not why we got into business. In the email I wrote, I think I said that's kind of like the least sexy word ever. But I want to help you see how discipline really can be such a sexy word and give you such sexy results, and how I think about think about this in the creative world. Y'all know ex-actress, I have so many creatives in my life, and how often I see disciplines and really creative constraints as part of what allows creativity to thrive, what really allows creatives to thrive, what allows people to be successful. We see this in the fitness world, right? We see how a few disciplines, a few constraints can really allow for that creativity for success. And it's the same in business. And I think sometimes in our online space, we talked about this a little bit in last week's live stream. We were talking about treating your business like a business and that business hat. But I think sometimes that can almost get a bad rap, and we can just move so far away from that and want everything to feel, just to be intuitive and just to be based on feeling and just to be based on what feels good in the moment. And I'm all for that as well. We'll chat about that, but there are a few key, I'm going to use the word disciplines, I don't know what else to call them, but tenets, philosophies that I find really support business, but also really support scaling. And when I think about scaling, I talk so much about helping clients build, grow, and scale profitable businesses on their terms. And I really see those as three distinct sections or areas in business. First, we're building a business. That's when you're building your foundation. Growing is when you're taking that foundation and you're kind of growing a house around it, right? You're growing your business house. That's when you're becoming profitable. That's when you're really growing your business. When your house gets at capacity and your house is full, then we look at scaling. And scaling is usually then how do we take your house and kind of add another floor on top or another couple floors and turn it into a skyscraper. But these are all different stages of business. And to scale, you first have to build and then you have to grow before you scale. And I want to see those as three different things. And we so often talk about this philosophy and idea of what got you here won't get you to where you want to go next. And even the way you're thinking, what you previously were thinking, those thought process won't get you to where you want to go next. And I think so much of that is true for scaling. The thought process that's necessary for building is not always the same thought process that's necessary for scaling. The thought process that goes into growing isn't always the same thought process that goes into scaling. And so that's a little bit of what we're going to chat about here when we're kind of going through those disciplines before we talk about the 3 simple ways to scale. I promise I'll give you those as well. Just to give context here too, so we're all on the same page. And one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is first let me just define scaling for you. So scaling, we kind of talked about it in this metaphor with building a home, but I really see this as how are you bringing in more revenue or more income and creating more impacts? I know if you're here, you care about that as well, without doing more work. It really is, scaling to me really is the whole idea of bringing in more monetary results for yourself. And then I really see it as also scaling your impact. So creating more of that ripple effect, serving more people or serving more people deeply without doing more, without actively getting into that hustle mode. So often when we're growing, the way we go from building to growing usually is through doing more. When we're scaling, we're creating bigger impact for ourselves and others without doing more work. So it's also like the littlest Dixie cup. I don't know why I brought that over today. I usually have like my big giant water glass. Kind of funny looking at that. So just so we're on the same page there with scaling. And one of the biggest things I find, and this is a little bit of a discipline, but just so that we can, again, be on the same page here. I find so often in our space, we're in such a rush to scale that often I'll have clients come to me and they're looking for ways to scale before they've first built and grown their business. And I think this can cause so much damage. If we look outside of our space and we look to the startup space, I pulled the stats on this. There's a landmark study, Startup Genome, found that 74% of high growth startups fail due to premature scaling. So 74% of high growth startups fail due to premature scaling. And I don't like to get into we're above statistics and get into creating stories around that. But I do think that's very helpful to see that outside of our space, how easy it is because of just the way I think we're wired as entrepreneurs and as humans and our want for whatever's next and for those big results to really want to rush at scaling, and how it's been found that scaling too quickly is really why so many businesses do fail. And then another statistic I found is 92% of businesses fail to scale. So we kind of have this on both sides. 92%, so that means about what? 8% of businesses are effectively, efficiently scaling. And if you look up stats on this more, you'll see this is really true over time. And then on the inverse, so many businesses are failing altogether because they're trying to scale too quickly. And so we see this as actually quite, it's not just in our space, this is quite a challenge. There's a great quote, and then I'll dive into the disciplines, but I think this is just helpful for what we're talking about today. It's by David Packard, and he says, a great company is more likely to die of indigestion of too much opportunity than to starve of too little. A great company is more likely to die of indigestion of too much opportunity than to starve of too little. I've had that quote sitting around my phone forever because I think it's just such a helpful reminder, and it's something I come back to all the time. And I want to offer that to you because, again, I promise you we will chat about the 3 easy ways to scale, but I think it's so important to remember, because I think that in and of itself is a discipline, to start to see that the buffet of opportunity, which I know when you're in the building phase, it doesn't seem true. I was just chatting about this with a client. And when you're in that phase, it can almost seem like there is a scarcity of opportunity. But I promise you, when you go from building to growing and growing to scaling, you're going to see there is a buffet of opportunity. And gorging on that opportunity and also scaling too quickly, that is what will cause the indigestion. Far more likely that's going to be the challenge point than there being a lack of opportunity for you in business. And I think that's just such a helpful thing to remember. And we see this in our space all the time. We see people scale real quickly and then we never hear from them again. It's a whole other live stream, and I don't want to talk about, I don't even know that that's helpful for like what happens when people scale too quickly, but I think it's just important for us to have as context before we talk about jumping into scaling, because that's why I wanted to talk about these disciplines first, because it feels really irresponsible otherwise for me just to throw blanket suggestions for scaling without us understanding what we kind of want to have in place as a foundation first. Okay, I'm hitting you all over the head with that. I think you all get it. But let's jump into some of those disciplines. So the first discipline here that I find so counterintuitive and so frustrating for my clients. Hey Marie, nice to have you here. I find this really frustrating for my clients to sometimes understand, and I think it's just so important to chat about, but is understanding that scaling is not the goal of your business when you're scaling. I'm going to explain that because I know you're probably like, wait, what do you mean? Scaling isn't the goal? Aren't we literally talking about how to scale our income and impact? Why is this a discipline? Why would I not want to scale? But what I want us to think about when it comes to business, your goal in business is at the end of the day to solve a problem for people or to create a desire. You know, the problem might be that you have a pleasure, like a desire point that you're giving people, and to essentially give people a result, and then to serve your clients and customers really fucking well in solving that problem or helping them get that desire and getting those benefits or results they want. Really, that's your goal as a business owner, and then to build a business around that where you're getting more efficient and your offer is just serving people better and better, and you're becoming really sustainable. And really, that's the goal of your business. And I say that as opposed to scaling is the goal, because what I find happens, and this is just like when we talk about the disciplines, what I want you to think about is how can you shift your thinking from my scaling is the goal and creating more impact as the goal, instead of flipping it to my goal is really how can I focus on my clients and how can I focus on my customers and serving them to the best, and seeing that scaling is really it's sort of the solution to the problem you have in business when you serve your clients and customers really well and solve their problems really well. What I find happens so often is business owners come into the space and they're just looking at how can I create a plan to scale and that becomes the goal. And that's why, what was the stat? Like, what did I say earlier? 74% of high growth startups fail due to premature scaling. I think that's part of the challenge, right? The goal becomes scaling for the sake of scaling. The focus becomes about scaling a business. And what gets lost in that is what actually creates scalability and what you actually need to have in place. And that scaling is not a goal. It really is that solution. It is that answer to having a business that is so sustainable, that is so well-oiled, that is serving people so well that there is a need to expand and scale. And not all businesses are served by scaling. which is kind of a whole nother conversation, but that's the first discipline I really want to offer to you before we get to the ways to practically scale, is to see, can you inverse your thinking from how do I set my goal as scaling, and instead think of how can I set my goal of serving people and solving this problem better and better? Can I scale, like how can I focus on that and then look to scale that? How can I scale my ability to serve clients, to serve customers? Because then again, your income and impact is going to scale along with that as a result. Let me know if that concept makes sense, because I think it's almost like not what our brain wants to hear, but I find it to be so important. And the more you can focus your business this way, the more, again, scaling is going to become a natural byproduct, a natural answer. I'm going to use myself as an example. The way I currently scale my business, I first had to be in a place where that was even a necessity, because I was serving clients and so well that I was at capacity and there was no more room for me to grow my income and impact with what I was kind of like how I was working. Scaling was really the solution to serving clients so well that I was at capacity. It was not, I'm growing a business and I want to make more money. How do I set myself up to scale? Now, there's nothing wrong with having a plan to scale and building. I have a few clients where we already know what their plan is to scale, and they're thinking that way as they're building and growing. There's nothing wrong with that, but kind of underneath that, the discipline we want to have, again, is not scaling for the sake of scaling, not rushing out to scale and being one of the startups that grow too quickly, and nothing wrong with fast growth, but do so where they're kind of getting that indigestion from fast growth, as opposed to looking at how can I become so sustainable and so well oiled in the way that I'm serving people that scaling is really the answer to that problem and need in my business. Right. I'm gonna go through these sort of quickly because I have a lot I wanna cover today. There's a great quote, though. I've got a lot of quotes today because this has been just on my mind quite a lot. This was from Entrepreneur, where they have a lot of great articles. And I love how they phrase this. After all, scale isn't the end game. The end game is building something your customers want and in turn creating a strong, sustainable business. Scale is just a means to that end. And I think that just says this concept so well. Scaling is a means to an end. Your goal is, again, serving your clients and customers well. And when you can take this concept, what you'll find is scaling actually becomes a whole lot easier. When scaling is so challenging is when we're scaling for the sake of scaling, or when we're scaling too early. This is when I find, clients will come to me and hire me and they're so frustrated and they're doing everything right on paper, right? They have a model to scale, and it's absolutely something that makes sense and it's practical. It's not like there's a hole in their plan or their strategy, but their focus is really on how can I scale for the sake of scaling, as opposed to how can I really focus on clients and customers first and serving them so damn well that scaling is the kind of means to that end. And it is so hard in business when you're approaching business from this place of like, how can I scale to scale? How can I just make money to make money? As opposed to really focusing on what business is about in the first place. I promise you that just makes everything in business feel so much easier. I think the same article was talking about this whole concept of just basically trying not to scale as really the mindset to have. And again, that doesn't mean we don't have strategy for it, but I think it just helps us shift the focus on, again, what scaling is really about. Star says, first off, hi. Secondly, yes. This definition makes so much sense on the framing of when, how to scale. Hi. And secondly, so glad that resonates and makes sense. So with this idea, and kind of with this concept, one of the so-called disciplines I really like to take, I borrow this from Jim Collins. He wrote From Good to Great, where they studied a lot of the companies you and I would all know that over a 10-year period, in which companies really did go from good to great in terms of their income and their impact and their profitability and their sustainability, and really looking at a lot of different metrics there and kind of what went into making those businesses, the companies that did go from good to great, what were some of those common denominators. And I So this isn't just like a fun, fluffy concept. It's really based on data. And I say that because I think this concept is so powerful and it's easy for us to miss the real business data that supports this principle. And it has a lot to do with this idea of scaling. And Jim Collins talks a lot about really being the companies that go from good to great, really focus on what can they be the best in the world at, what do they love to do, and what will people pay for? And kind of where is that intersecting point? But they really focus on what can they be the best in the world at. And with this whole idea of really focusing on what your business is about first and foremost, if you're wanting to scale in that discipline of serving your clients so darn well and being focused on what's the problem you solve and how do you get better and better at that, and the experience your clients and customers are having, I think this goes into the same concept here of really having that discipline before scaling, when you're looking at scaling, of what can I be the best in the world at in terms of the problem I can solve, in terms of my business, in terms of how I can support people, what do I absolutely love and want to do, and then what will people pay for, where does that intersect, and keeping that as such a core discipline for when you're looking at ways to scale and looking at what can you stack when it comes to offers, and and again, I promise we will go to the practical easy ways to scale. But using this lens, I think, is such an important discipline, because again, what I find happens if we're taking that inverse approach where we're just looking at scaling for the sake of scaling and sort of this goal, like how can I scale as quickly as possible because someone in the online space said that that's the goal, and kind of missing that business owner might not even be around in a couple more years, because that's what we see happens when we scale too quickly. And really focusing on, if I can focus on those 3 questions, that is going to allow me to serve my clients and customers really well. That's going to allow me to be one of those companies that goes from good to great, that scales, and that's still around year after year after year, instead of one of the statistics that unfortunately, tries to grow and scale too quickly and isn't around to serve their clients and customers well and enjoy the work that they're doing. And I know if you're here because you care more than just making money. It's because you also want to make money in a way that impacts others and that also really fulfills you. So one of my personal disciplines, and what I support a lot of clients around, is really taking that frame of, yes, absolutely, let's scale and let's have that as a focus. I mean, y'all know I'm all about like, how do we make more money on our terms? I want you to scale your income and impact. I'm not mad at that at all, but really doing so intentionally through that lens of scaling is not the goal. Scaling is really the solution to the problem of being at capacity, of serving your clients so damn well. And through that, if you're going to scale by adding things on, really looking through the lens of what can I be the best in the world at? It doesn't mean you actually have to be the best in the world. I realize that is almost like puts pressure and kicks up a lot of enoughness, but it's really what can you show up in that sort of way, because there's a lot of things. If you're here, you're likely a high achiever, you're likely gifted in many areas. There's probably a lot of things you can do really well. And I want to invite you to think about not what are all the things I could do really well, not what are all the things I could make money at, not what are all the offers I could also sell to bring in more income, because I think that's how I can scale. And instead think about, what can I be the best in the world at? What do my people like? What do I love to do, and what will my people pay for? And I think that can really help also turn the volume down on, because we're entrepreneurs, we're creatives. I'm sure you have a list of 500 things you could do. I know I do, but it can just help turn the volume down on all those ideas so you know what few things to focus on. Which brings me kind of to my next discipline here, which is less is more, and really understanding scaling as a form of literally what the word means, right? To scale, we think about moving upwards and to kind of increase, and like it's a vertical versus a horizontal versus going wide. And with this same Jim Collins concept, I think we can really approach that discipline to scaling here and thinking, what can I be the best in the world at that I also love to do that people will pay me for? You're likely gonna have a handful of things. Now, there might be lots of ways you can express that, but there's probably gonna be a handful of things that are an answer to that question. And I really wanna invite you to use that as a part of the discipline to thinking, how can I scale vertically instead of horizontally? Because again, I find what sabotages so many business owners, and what my clients probably get frustrated with me all the time about, but hopefully love me long-term for it, is we are idea generators. We are entrepreneurs, we're creatives. There are lots of ideas we have. We're usually quick starts. We're usually great at like oh, I could do this, and I can get it started. And especially if you've successfully built something, it's just easy to look at all the things you could be good at, but not great at, and that you could monetize, and really think that that is a way to scale. And okay, that's on the camera. And what I want to keep reminding you here is that's fine if you want to do that. But I always remind clients, if you're going to run at another idea, that's called building another business, or that's called pivoting if you don't like your previous business. And that's okay, but we want to be very clear and intentional then that you're either pivoting or building a brand new business, and set up expectations accordingly, and really approach business from the place of, if you're building a brand new business, building a business requires something very different than scaling a business, and really understanding that, and not thinking that starting something brand new over here is scaling a business when it's really building something brand new. I love to use the examples of literal buildings because I think it's helpful to understand the concept that way. I live in New York City. I use this example all the time. When they build a new building, a new skyscraper here, the first thing they do is they have to dig down into the ground and excavate out all the crap. Then they lay a foundation. Then they start to build. So before you could ever see anything above ground, I lived across the street for a while from a building that was being built from the ground up. I cannot tell you how much time was first, like the majority of the time was first spent literally digging out the crap from the ground before the foundation was even laid, right? That's part of building your business. And then the foundation was laid. Then you got to see the first ground, right? That is what building and growing a business is. Scaling your business is after that has all been done. Excavate the ground, build the foundation, build your first floor. Then we scale and add the second floor and the third floor and the fourth floor. That's the way I want you to think about scaling. What I think happens a lot in our space is we think about it as, okay, I've dug it, excavated this, I've laid a foundation. Maybe I haven't even built the first floor yet. I have a whole new idea. Let me go excavate a whole new plot of land. Gotta find the land, gotta excavate it, gotta build a whole new foundation. Maybe I'll get to the first floor and then, oh, I got another idea. And we can see how that's not really scaling. If we think about the whole idea of scaling as making more money, creating more impact without working more, doing that is using the plot of land you've already bought, the excavation you've done, the foundation you've built, the first floor you've built, right? Using that all as a solid foundation. So all you gotta do is build one more level and maybe furnish it. It's not how do I keep creating more plots, finding more plots of land and starting all over again. That's called building another business. Hey, nice to have you on here, Ali. Is it Ali or Ali? Let me know if it's probably Ali. Let me know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly because names are important. So let me know if that concept is making sense, because that's really the discipline I want you to think about when building, growing, and scaling your business, so you can understand where are you at, right? We don't want to build the second floor to a building if you're still excavating the ground. And that's what happens when we talk about that statistic where 74% of startups fail because they scale too quickly. That's often what's happening. They're trying to build the second floor, the third floor, the top floor when they're still in the process of excavating or building that foundation. So you just want to know where, like, they're all great stages. There's nothing wrong with anything, but understanding where you're at, and then really check in with and have that discipline of, am I scaling vertically or am I trying to scale horizontally? If I'm scaling horizontally, it's more likely that I'm pivoting or building something new. That isn't wrong at all. Have at it if that's what you want, but I would just be really mindful of being honest with yourself about what you're doing there. And if we're thinking strictly about scaling, which is making more money, right? Bringing in more income, creating more impact without doing more work, without hustling more, we want to think about that vertical build. Okay, and then the last discipline here before I go into those easy ways to scale, all right, we're doing okay on time, is really understanding that the discipline of focusing on leadership and growth. What I think is so often forgotten with scaling that I think is a little bit different from building and growing is the element of really bringing in leadership and growth and really sitting in wearing that CEO hat. What we talked about last week, that business hat, really treating your business like a business and having that time as the CEO who's not just working in the business, but really focused on the business, seeing how that is really a big component of scaling. And so often when we're building and growing, a lot of what you're putting into place for before you have that leadership are things like marketing and sales and creating those processes. And we want to have those, really well oiled, and we're getting really clear on the offer, and we're getting really clear on customer service and serving clients really well. That's so much of building and growing. right? We want that in place. If we're then looking at scaling, we're assuming that's all there, but really what we're adding on then is that leadership component. And so often if you're going to scale, you're going to be looking at bringing on a team and having support so that you have that capacity to scale. And a lot of that really does come with having that discipline of focusing on what does it mean to be in a leadership role? What does it mean to focus on growth, and really spending time cultivating that, as opposed to simply how can I just make more money? And I think, again, if we could focus on the leadership and growth and have that discipline, then you'll be one of the businesses that scales really beautifully and that's around year after year and continues to scale and has that sustainable scalability, as opposed to kind of when we focus on scaling for the sake of scaling as the end goal, and we miss taking that mindset and approach of leadership. I find that so often where you might make quick money and you might make some more money, but it's really hard to have that be a sustainable, scalable income and impact growth. Hopefully that piece makes sense there, but I think this is, again, just thinking about building and growing, so much of that is looking at the forward facing part of your business, and scaling, so much of that is looking at being able to, yes, still have that forward facing, but also kind of backward facing, the back end part of your business, and seeing that you really have both of those in place. And that's, again, if we're using this vertical build as an example, that's what gives you the infrastructure for your business so that you're capable of scaling. And that's taking that mindset and approach that's looking at questions like, are we profitable? What's the most profitable part of our business? How are we leveraging that? What are the expenses in our business? Where are we leveraging those expenses and investments in a way that help us to scale? Where do we need to minimize because it's not helping us to scale? Being able to look at some of those things from a leadership lens versus, I think, when we're in building and growing, I think we're just taking it's so much more like kind of running at that growth, I think is so, again, the focus of the discipline we're talking about. Okay, I'm just seeing if there's anything there notes-wise. Let me know if you have any questions. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory, but one of the things here I had just as the questions, just in terms of thinking through that lens of the leadership lens. I think so much of that is also kind of everything that's inherent with these disciplines we're talking about, which is looking at if there's that buffet of opportunities, really being able to come from that leadership role of what are the few opportunities that make sense for us to put onto our plate, versus really coming from that scarcity mindset or not taking a leadership approach, which is almost like I'm at the buffet and I need to gorge myself here because every opportunity seems shiny, instead of it being able to have that discipline and know these are the few opportunities that make sense that allow us to scale. These are all the things we want to say no to or cut. And even within, sometimes that means within your own business, things that are working really well, being able to take that same approach and have that leadership role to make those decisions. All right, I want to pivot unless anyone has a question. And since people are kind of hopping on later, I also want to remind everyone, say hi, leave a comment. We're giving away a free copy of Sell Out Without Feeling Like a Sellout. We'll pick winners tomorrow. So if you're watching now or on the replay, definitely all you have to do is leave a comment if you want access to that, and we'll pick someone as a winner. But let's pivot to what I really wanted to talk about today, but I need to share all that first to be responsible with y'all before we talk about scaling. And I'm going to share 3 really easy ways you can scale your income and impact without hustling more. So I want you to take those disciplines in mind as we're talking about this, and really understand as we're talking about this, that mindset of scaling as an answer to serving your clients and customers so well that you need to see how you can do more of that without working more, not as the goal where we're focused on the money. I promise when you focus on clients and customers first, the money comes as a byproduct anyway. Like promise you. But these are easy ways to scale without hustling and working a whole lot longer because that is the whole idea with scaling, right? It's bringing in more revenue without working more. So the first thing I always invite clients to think about is not simply how can we create a new offer? Sometimes it does mean creating a new offer, but first thing I always want to look at is how do we expand capacity? So if we think about what we've been talking about here, serving your clients, that scaling is an answer to really the demand that comes from serving your clients and customers so well, from solving their problems so well, from creating results where you're creating that demand. Most likely what that means, if you're at a place where you need to scale, if there is a need for scale, I was gonna say a requirement, but if you're at that place, that generally tells me that you're at capacity. If you're at capacity, the first thing we get to look at is just how do we increase your capacity? And I think that can mean a lot of different things depending on your business model. For many people, the first thing that means is looking at how do we start building and growing a team where we're outsourcing things, and just seeing that that can be a way you scale your income and impact without hustling more. Because the more you can start to look at what are all the things I don't need to do in my business and how can I leverage my time by bringing on support. Yes, you might be investing money up front, but we have to start to think, if you're at capacity, that means you don't have any hours left to give in your business. If you can outsource some things that don't need to be done by you, and I know this seems really obvious and almost captain obvious, but I know because I chat with clients about this all the time, we need to hear this more than once. As you pay other people to support you and to support your business, and this is very much stepping into your leadership role, and as you do so as a smart business owner, really looking at where are the places I can leverage my time and the income or the revenue this business is generating. Yes, you might have a temporary decrease in profit margin, but you're going to increase your capacity. If you increase your capacity, and you're doing so because you've been at capacity, because there really is a need to scale. Scaling is an answer to the problem of your capacity that we're talking about. That tells us that means you can fill that capacity in with revenue. And so your overall revenue is going to go up. Even if your profit margin goes down a little bit, likely you're going to take home a larger income, and you're going to be able to impact more lives because of that capacity and the way you increase that capacity. So I think that's just one way you can see how taking that leadership, that CEO mindset, helps you to start to look at, wait, without even having to create a new offer, without even having to create more marketing and go through a launch. Step one for many, many people is looking at that capacity. And for most people, there's an opportunity for places to build and grow a team and really focus on that as a way, that like first leverage point. I know for me, the first way I scaled one-on-one was not the revenue share model. The first way was really looking at, I'm at capacity. Let me bring on support. I was chatting about this with some clients last week. They're asking me one-on-one capacity, and what my fully booked number is now is not what my fully booked number was 3 years ago or 4 years ago whenever I first brought on my first team member. My fully booked number was so much less because I was running solo. And it wasn't until I brought on team and grew my team that I was able to increase my capacity. And I didn't actually have to work more. I was working the same amount, but I was able to increase revenue that way simply because I was focused more than on what I could do to serve clients without by having team take on more things. Now, of course, I hit a capacity at that, and so then we had to look at other ways to scale, but that was the first way I scaled. And it was the easiest way to scale because there was that demand already, so nothing else had to be done outside of, nothing. Growing a team, leading a team is absolutely its own skill set and learning curve, but that was really the focus and the lever to press instead of rushing off and creating a new offer. And again, not that creating a new offer is bad or wrong by any means. Lots of people scale that way. But I find if we think about this whole idea of like scaling too quickly, sometimes the infrastructure we need is first to have that capacity. So looking at capacity might also be things like creating a new offer because you're at capacity if you do run a one-on-one model and you're seeing there's no more of me to go around. I am at capacity. Maybe I've outsourced some things, or I'm at capacity in terms of my energetic desire, need to serve one-on-one. So I think that's when looking at serving one-to-many might make sense and creating an offer in which how can you really stay going back to that discipline of the Jim Collins philosophy of what can you be the best in the world at? What do you love to do? What will people pay you for? How can you think about building vertically on top of the offer you already have instead of looking at like creating something brand new over here? I think that's when we can look at how can we take what you already have that you're at capacity with and look at how could that be something you can serve one-to-many. And that looks different for everyone, but I think seeing that can be a really easy solution for scaling. That's when we start creating new offers. But I think the easiest way to scale your offers is really coming from that mindset of how can I build onto what's already working well and just have more humans at one time versus now that there is this demand, how do I go create something entirely new? Because that's almost like, remember, building like a new plot. Okay, just see if there's anything else I wanted to share with capacity. I do think the team piece there, not everyone, I have clients who don't have a team, not everyone has to have a team to scale, but I do think that's something when we think about scaling, so often we just get focused on the front end and the way the money comes into the business and the front end. I think so often we just think that means rush to create another offer. And I mean, y'all know me, I'm like, one-on-one, I have scaled one offer and had that for 6 years. So, but I have plenty of clients who have multiple offers and have scaled with other offers, but we're always very slow to add on something new and first very quick to look at how can we increase capacity, how can we leverage and scale what's already working before adding something new on. And so even my clients who have gone more into maybe a one-to-many, a lot of times then what they're also doing is scaling back on one-on-one or scaling back on something else. So they're still staying within that like focus zone of genius for themselves and really staying within their capacity. So they're not stretching that capacity, because otherwise it's more growing and not so much scaling. Because the whole idea we're talking about here with scaling again is how do you create more income without hustling more, not how are you just making more money because you've created more offers and you're working more. So hopefully that makes sense there. But ask me a question if not. Okay, let's go on to the next one unless anyone has questions. And I'll drink out my little Dixie cup there. Okay, so the next, this is I think it kind of is a discipline, but it's also just a really easy way to think about how you can scale more income without doing more. Again, everyone here knows how to do more, so that's why I really want to talk about the easy ways you can think about bringing in more income and creating more impact without having to do a whole lot more work, is thinking through the lens of efficiency. So this is kind of one of those things where I feel like it's like discipline, where it's like, oh, efficiency, that's not super sexy. I think sometimes that can sound a little boring. I personally think efficiency and discipline and things that are boring are the sexiest things ever, because they create the sexiest result on the other side, like making more money without doing more work. So hang with me on this one if it doesn't feel super exciting, because I'm not giving you like 14 things like to go hustle and do, because remember, that's the whole point here. But if we think about scaling and the whole idea of that and what we're talking about here, so much of this is also about efficiency, and we're thinking about that leadership and that CEO mindset and starting to really take that lens and approach with your business. So much of what scaling, like if we're like scaling your take home, you can scale your business simply by looking at how are we being more efficient with where we're allocating time. How are we being, like that can open up capacity. How are we being more efficient with team hours? Because that's going to decrease the spend and allow for a larger profit margin. And I want to be mindful there, this isn't necessarily a live stream about team. This does not mean how do we cut hours and try to cut corners and limit hours because we want to like pressure team to like hustle and do work quickly. That is not what I'm talking about here. When I'm talking about efficiency, it's looking at where are we doing things that aren't really contributing to creating income in the business. It's starting to take that CEO hat and starting to look at where are the efficiencies we can create in terms of streamlining processes and systems. This year, this is a big focus for me in my business, and really looking at ideally, we're still going to scale income this year, and I very much plan and intend on scaling the overall number, but I'm also really looking at how are we also scaling in terms of efficiency, because I know that sets the business up long term, and I know if I kind of scale the profit margin, that also means the business is really healthy, and looking at things just in terms of where are we leaking energy, where are we having myself or team do things that really don't make sense or aren't contributing to the business's bottom line. I think of efficiencies too in terms of what we talked about at the beginning of this live stream, in terms of client in terms of serving clients really well, in terms of the quality of the offer or the product we're serving, in terms of our efficiency of delivery. This is like kind of a side note, but I use Satori for all of our client bookings and billings. They just went through a massive like reboot and up level, which I'm so grateful for. I'm grateful for Satori. I'm team Satori anyway. And I think the founder and the people who run it are just excellent, and they're excellent at customer service. But really grateful for the kind of upgrades and up levels. But oh my goodness, talk about a like lack of efficiency for a hot second and we're kind of relearning stuff, and there's just been so many kind of tech snafus, and this is one of like just the great examples of what it's absolutely okay, because we're not rushing to scale too quickly. So we have time to focus on, okay, a couple things have been like mistakes have been made here, we can address these things. But if we were scaling too quickly, or if we weren't focused on efficiency, this could be like, that could be a really big cog in the wheel, as opposed to something we're very much focused on. I think it's just a good, easy example there. Another example here with efficiency that I think, again, it doesn't sound super sexy, but it's so related to your scalability and your sustainable scalability and your ability, again, to make more income without working more and to take home more income without working more. I'm like trying to think of how to say this, because I'm actually a big fan of ads when they're used in a way that strategically makes sense. And I have plenty of clients who use ads as a way to increase visibility and as a way to scale because they have the capacity for it. But I think so often we think about scaling as simply how can we just increase the revenue number itself by doing things like throwing ads at something to just bring in more money on the front end, but we don't think about the profit margin. And when I think about scalability and sustainable scalability and bringing in more income and creating more impact, I'm thinking through, it's great if that outward flashy number is bigger, but how are we increasing the number you're actually taking home? And that's where efficiency comes in. And that's where you can see, without even changing your business, you can, if you're creating efficiencies and if you're looking at things like your workflow and your team and where you're spending time and energy, you can increase that take-home profit margin exponentially without doing anything else, which again sets your whole business up to be so well-oiled, so that then if you do want to stack things as you're scaling vertically, it makes it so much easier, so that though you are very scalable in terms of that more visible revenue number as well. Hopefully that makes sense there. I think a really good example of this, I made myself a note to share this as an example, but just in terms of looking at things you can adjust with your workflow that really contribute to your scalability, and how I think we just tend to think about how can I just rush off and create more offers. One of the things for me that was really important when I was kind of taking that CEO lens and looking at my business and doing a bit of a business audit is noticing how the amount of time, y'all know, I create a lot of, I was gonna say a fuck ton, but I was gonna try not to curse. Now I'm cursing anyway. I create a lot of content. We put a lot of content out into the world, and I love to create content. I love to provide value for you. I really come from the school of thought of give value first, ask for the sale second, and provide 10 times more value than the amount of money I want to ask for or make. And that is so the way I think. And I know that at a certain point in business, it is not scalable if I'm recreating and I'm creating every piece of content and value over again from scratch. And we have a lot of written content. And I found at a certain point, I think it was probably last year, where I was actually preventing my ability to scale because of how much new content I was creating and writing. And I had to really be clear with myself that as much, because I love to create content too, as much as I love that, if I'm also looking for what's scalable and I'm looking for what's efficient as a business owner and I'm wearing more my CEO hat, I had to look at that really wasn't efficient, and that really wasn't the most efficient use of my time, especially since we have so much content we can repurpose and so much content that's being poured out into the world. And I had to look at how could I make that more efficient and how could I make repurposing more efficient, really so that the workflow I have could be more efficient, so that I can have more capacity, so that we can scale. Because otherwise I really was not creating an efficient workflow, capping my own capacity and really limiting my ability to scale. So I think that's just an example there of how that didn't look like necessarily having a new offer or anything on the front end of the business. That was really much more on the back end of the business and that leadership discipline we were talking about. But looking at the business that way is also what created capacity, also what created more efficient workflows, also what created up some different team structures and some different processes we have in place so that I'm able to have the capacity to be able to scale more of those front end offers. So I hope that makes sense. So that's the second one there. And easy, I mean, just even listening through that, if you're thinking through efficiency, that's literally doing less work, hustling way less so that you have capacity for sustainability, but also to increase your profit margin, your income, and your impact. And I would say we're talking about the profit margin there, but I really see when you're more efficient, yes, that helps your profit margin, but when you're more efficient, when your team's more efficient, that also lends to the capacity, and so that you're also opening up more capacity, whether that's more literal capacity for clients or more energetic capacity for you, for the income to flow through. Because we talk about this, I think, so much for you to be able to scale, for income to come into your business, for clients to come into your business, you have to have the space for them. Right? Money loves a purpose, money loves a container. Scalability is also really requires a container space for that money to come through, which requires capacity in your business, which often means we need to be efficient and kind of well-oiled for that capacity to exist. Okay, last one. This is super, super simple. And I'm offering this because I think my clients, every time I tell them this is like, you could just do this as a way to scale, they're always sort of like, right. Like, it's almost so obvious we forget it as an option because our online space likes to sell complicated, because I think our brain thinks the more complicated it is, the better, the smarter it is. So this is gonna be so simple, which is why I saved it for last, because otherwise you would just hop off the live stream. You can raise your rates. Raising your rates is a very simple way to scale. And again, I'm not discounting creating new offers and creating new programs as a way to scale, especially if you want to start serving one-to-many. I think for most business owners, that is absolutely the way to go. But I want to remind you, before you even get to that, one of the simplest ways to scale, if you're at capacity, because remember, scaling is not a goal. So I think this is also helpful to know, should I raise my rates or not? Scaling is really a solution to a problem of I'm at capacity. And not that you can't raise your rates if you're not at capacity. There are other reasons to raise your rates as well. Many of my clients come to me and they're undercharging and overworking, and so that's a reason to raise your rates, and do a whole live stream on reasons to raise your rates. But through the conversation of scaling, which is what we're talking about today, and remembering that scaling is a solution to a problem in your business, which is we have grown to capacity. We're serving our clients and customers so well. One of the simplest ways to scale then without working more, right? Again, want to be so mindful here because I'm not getting to coach everyone one-on-one in this live stream. This does not mean you cannot create a one-to-many offer and that is not also a viable option for scaling, but we're talking about without having to do any more work on this live stream. Raising your prices is one of the simplest ways to scale and to really create that solution for if you're serving your clients and customers really well, if you're getting better and better at solving their problems and better and more efficient at serving them and really working that infrastructure, you've created the capacity and you've created the efficiency and you're creating those great results for your people and you're at demand. Raising your rates really can be something that makes a lot of sense. Now, again, I'm not coaching everyone one-to-one here. I have certain clients where that doesn't make sense for their market. It doesn't make sense for their offer. You're a business owner. You can set whatever price point you want, but for the market, it doesn't necessarily make sense. And that's when we do start to look at other ways to scale, other solutions to that problem of being at capacity. However, for many of you, and just knowing how many of my clients come to me with where their price points are at, for most of you, there's generally a fair amount of room to grow at price point before we come up with another solution. And so using myself as an example with scaling one-on-one, because people are often like, wait, you scaled one-on-one? I absolutely did. First, we looked at capacity, like I said. Then I looked at efficiency and, those pieces in place. And then I raised my prices before I even added on revenue share. And not that I couldn't have added on revenue share earlier, and that would have been absolutely, a way to scale as well. But just so you can see, those are all ways that my income scaled when I talk about adding on over 100K per year for the last few years. Those are sort of the steps that went to scaling more without working more. I've actually decreased my work hours, I think, year over year as well, while increasing my income. So that makes me very happy because it's like a scale. And then we added on revenue share, which that's basically a different model, but that's another way to scale. For another client, that might be creating a new offer or one-to-many offer. So I want to offer that as, again, just so your brain can see sort of like when is the time to scale, and just starting to see the definition of scaling, the way we want to think about scaling, the mindset around scaling, the thought process around it as, again, it's not the goal, it's really that solution to a really great problem in your business, but it's the solution to and the focus to the goal of serving your people so well and being so focused on getting better and better solving their problems. And then just seeing there are some really simple ways you can scale your income and impact, again, without ever having to do more work before you start even thinking about creating more offers or launching something new. Again, we are not discounting any of those as really viable options to scale as well, but just so that you can start to see some of those things that are probably already in front of you that I think are so easy to overlook, and particularly the capacity and efficiency options, because I think those are also, with whatever if you are creating another offer, are so important from the leadership and CEO perspective to really take into account and to always be thinking through that lens of that, to support the sustainability of your business as well as the profit margin in your business, because pricing may or may not be a solution that makes sense for everyone. All right, I hope that is super helpful for you. I'm going to give a quick recap on this. Before I do, a quick reminder, if you're watching now, before tomorrow, so what's tomorrow, Wednesday, if you leave a comment, if you say hi, if you're watching on the replay, we're going to pick a winner for Sellout Without Feeling Like a Sellout. It's my 6-week sales course for the art and strategy of selling without the ick of heart-centered sales, which is a psychology-based and integrity-based approach to sales that I personally use, that I support my clients with, and that I teach. So we will get one person access to that as a thank you for joining me. And then we also have next week, we have our free monthly training, Your Money Map. And so I will drop a link to that. I believe it's kimmargetsinger.com/money-map, but I will make sure and drop a link for that. So be sure to sign up for that, especially if you want the playbook, because it has a nice flow chart and journaling questions that you can answer in the PDF and store for yourself. But just to recap what we were talking about as well today, in terms of 3 ways to scale your income and impact. We talked about those 3 disciplines, and the first discipline really being that scaling isn't the goal, and really taking that approach of the goal is really serving clients and customers so well and solving that problem, and scaling being the solution to the problem of serving people so well that you're at capacity. The second discipline, really taking that idea of, I don't know if it's really less is more, but it's really that vertical approach versus that horizontal approach to scaling. And we use that skyscraper example there, and having that as a discipline for yourself. And if not, really think about that as either pivoting or starting a new business. The third discipline for scaling, really thinking about focusing on your leadership and growth and that CEO approach and time in your business, and really starting to put a focus on that. Whereas when you're building and growing, it's so much more that forward focus, starting to take that behind the scenes focus in your business as well. And then those 3 ways to scale without doing more work, without hustling more, just the simple ways before you even create a new offer. The reminder on those was looking at how can you expand your capacity, how can you increase your efficiency, and is there an opportunity to raise your prices? I hope that is helpful for you. And for any of you who want more support with building, growing, or scaling your business, I love to work with clients at every stage of business on the clarity, mindset, strategy, and action that goes into that, so you can make more money in a way that's super sustainable, that lights you up, that fills you up, that is on your terms. That is what I do all day long. I work with clients only one-on-one. It would be my joy to connect with you and support you. We have some spots opening up in April and May, so I will drop a link for a discovery call. Hop on a call with me, we can chat through what that would look like, and then I will be back next week. We'll have our free masterclass, and I cannot wait to dive into that with y'all. Lots of love.